Yeah, it's okay. It is so appropriate. Oh my gosh. So we're live. Hi, everybody. We are only 8 minutes behind, so I'm going to blame tech. Hi, we're here with Melissa Guller. And Melissa, thank you for your patience, everybody. Melissa's joining us from Brooklyn, New York to chat about podcasts. How are you doing? I know she was holding a hand through the little tech debacle. Good.
Oh yeah, let's bring it back. This is how our sound check went. All of our best efforts out the window, but I'm excited to be here regardless. Great content knows no tech bounds.
Yeah, no, really. I mean, that's not why they show up, right? Or why they watch the replay, which hopefully you guys will do. So we'll jump in because I want to respect Melissa's time and yours. And today we will be chatting all about podcasting. As you know, Melissa Guller, she's the founder of Wit and Wire. It's a really awesome podcast all about starting a podcast, right? And strong and launching and growing your podcast with raving fans. And I think that's totally appropriate because, you know, people in this group, what we want to do is not only create followers, but a loyal fan base, right? And she's a seasoned podcast host, producer. She has a course. She's an instructor with both at Skillshare, if you know those courses, as well as a new course called Teachable. And it's for entrepreneurs that want to sell courses, but we'll speak to that a little later. Yeah, she is just kind of a seasoned pro teaching all this stuff since 2015. How, Melissa, are you doing in terms of your work in this environment? I know you're not able to get into Manhattan a lot, and has this changed what you do a lot?
It has, but I think it's opened me up to more opportunities because what's great about running an online business is that I can reach anyone, anywhere. And just as a lot of people are listening to podcasts while they're home, a lot of people are looking for something to do with their time. So I'm excited to just kind of put myself out there as much as possible to help people start podcasts while maybe they have time that, for better or worse, they wouldn't have had before.
That's right. This environment is breeding its own, it's a platform. Like, there is more content out there. I posted on this ago than ever before. And of course, we all know I'm a big proponent of make the right choice in terms of your content, right? If you're going to do something, devote as much as you can to the best 2 or 3 channels. You know, it's really hard to commit to yourself to 6 things and nail them all. So I was telling Melissa and I were chatting about the why behind your podcast, and that if you are going to be an expert, if you have a really good reason, like an industry, you know, you want to be step ahead, really outshine some competitors. Can you use podcasting that way? What are your views on that?
It's a great question. And I'll be the first to say that I don't think podcasting is for everyone. For example, podcasting compared to blogging, there's a bigger time commitment. I'm not going to pretend that there isn't. But what podcasting has over other platforms is a couple of things. First, it's a little bit more personal because they get to hear your voice. And not just that, but they get to bring you into their lives. So something like YouTube, they have to be kind of fully dedicated to watching a video. But with audio only, they can be commuting in a past life of 3 months ago, or they can be cleaning their house and you can be joining them for their everyday activities. And over time, you'll build a relationship with your listeners. And that's why I often use that phrase, raving fans, because podcast listeners are some of the most loyal fans you can have. They'll rave about your podcast. They'll talk about your services. They'll recommend you to friends. And that personal connection, I don't think you can build with just a social media platform, or even, I don't want to say just a blog, because blogs have a huge amount of value for the right people. But if you're trying to build more relationships and really show off your expertise, then a podcast can be a great way to do that.
If you have all your messages, right? I'm going to start by talking with Melissa now about something. Let's get into it. Let's say you've done the work of the why, and you've also done the work of Melissa's, podcast checklist, which we'll get to later. what is so important about that first episode? Like, how important is it to start strong?
I think it's everything. And there's two sides of this coin. The first episode is your first impression on the world. And often I recommend that new podcasters launch with more than one episode on your first day. And that's because it's a strategy stolen straight from Netflix. When they come out with more episodes of The Great British Bake Off, I want to watch every single episode in a row. So if you can give people more than one opportunity to get to know you on day one, then that'll leave a great first impression. And in the first episode in particular, no matter what format you choose, no matter what topic you're discussing, I think it's a great idea to do what some people call an episode 0, or you can still call it episode 1, but introduce yourself, especially if you're going the route of doing an interview style podcast, which is really popular and is a great way to build not just your authority, but your network. The downside to interviewing is that you don't get to give as much of your background and your expertise because your role is to help your guest really shine. So that's why I always recommend that experts take the opportunity to make that first episode or episode 0 about you. Don't be afraid to brag about your relevant credentials. Tell people why you started the podcast, why it's so important to you, and think about it as the start of a really long-lasting relationship. And the only caveat I'll say is that your first episode is so important because for the lifetime of your podcast, you'll probably always refer new listeners back to episode 1. But the truth is that every episode will be somebody's first episode. And that's why it's important to still include little moments of who you are throughout every episode, whether it's just mentioning your name, what you do, or your business.
Right. So having that kind of that personal brand nailed down, a couple of your core key messages. And I will venture to say, I actually just posted something on this yesterday. You bring up a great point. Are you going to be the star of the show all the time? Are you going to bring guests on? And we'll go to guests in a minute. But it's interesting because I feel my personal view is just because I know I have 20 years experience in media training, coaching, public relations, and media interviews. However, I find that there is a good way to ask questions as well that can actually demonstrate your expertise. So there's a way to do both. And I know you'd have experience with this as well. Let's move on to guests because you brought them up. I guess it's like do's and don'ts. How important are your guests? And what I'm getting at here is quality of guests in terms of your position and the reputation, because you're trying to stand out and up your credibility. Tell me a little bit about your experience booking and having guests.
Definitely. I think that as we started talking about, the interview format where you bring guests onto your show is popular for a reason. A lot of listeners love tuning in. They love seeing you as this curator of knowledge, and you'll become associated with all of the people who you bring onto your show. So this is an excellent question because anybody on your podcast, of course, is a reflection of you and your brand. Now, what I will say is that where a lot of people get hung up is thinking, oh, I don't have a huge social media following. I don't have a huge email list. Does that mean that I can't pitch guests bigger than me? Does it mean that I can't get anybody to even say yes to my show? And something that was a pleasant surprise, even early in my podcast journey, is that I found that people are really willing to come on podcasts because it's a platform for them. You have an audience, no matter how small it feels. And if they can get in front of your audience, if it's matching their audience, they'll probably say yes. It's a good kind of, as seen in checkbox for their website. If they can say they've been on your podcast, that reflects really well on them. But the other part of having guests that I feel we skate over a lot is the fact that guests don't have to be experts and they don't have to have a huge influence to make an impact. There's definitely a reason to go after those larger guests because they will bring in guests. And if they promote your episode to their audience, as you should help them do, then that'll bring more listeners to your show.
Okay.
But instead of just experts, think about
and I think
stories. There are so many other types of people. Somebody who's had the personal experience. Like, it's not just about the expert. I would say anybody who's been affected by your topic is a good guest to have. And I may
providing all of those insights. Love that. No, you didn't cut out, but I love that. all the insights. So it's just getting ahead of your audience. This is what you're trying to do.
Exactly. And as an
All those
expert,
different points
as
of view.
all of you are, imagine even some of your clients, some of the people that you've worked with, they could make excellent guests because not only does it showcase your expertise if you were able to help them get a result, but a lot of your ideal listeners and ideal future customers will see themselves in your guest's shoes. And so the more that you can show them what the end goal looks like based on working with you, the more that they will want to work with you and see you as an expert as well.
Very true. Yeah. So the credibility thing, you can't skip it. You know, I do the Facebook, everything from the Facebook creep, check out their Instagram. Are your channels even aligning? You know, do the brands align? It's just so key. And then that quick 10 minutes just to find flow is so nice. If you combat tech challenges in that 10 minutes, great. If you don't, that's okay too.
Exactly.
So we're moving on.
You mentioned just before quickly we move on, the importance of doing your research. Even if somebody recommends a guest to you, don't take them at face value, because just because somebody's an excellent guest doesn't mean they're an excellent guest for your show and your audience. You're the ambassador for your listeners and what they need. So make sure you're always just making sure there's like alignment and that they're right for your show.
Absolutely. So moving along to, so having a first episode is important. So sounding like a pro, coming off like a pro. Now, we're not trying to charlatan anybody, right? The point being highlighting your best. Sounding from our point of view, or the point of view of the group, sounding like an expert, it always comes back to stick to what you know, right? Stick to your area, being clear on your messages and your purpose for the podcast. So one of those things I like to share with people is, you know, don't be all things to all people. You will never solve that one problem. But how does this apply to podcasting in terms of really sounding like you belong there?
I think it's a great question. There's two sides of this probably. One is, let's say you're doing a solo episode or you're the one sharing knowledge. You can choose from so many topics in your expertise, and especially early on as a podcaster, don't feel like you have to reinvent the wheel. Pick the questions that most of your clients ask you about, the things that people come to you about the most often, and start where you're comfortable, because you're learning a whole new platform. So don't feel like you also have to learn all new skills. Now, on the other hand, we talk about interviewing a lot. And when you bring guests onto your show, that gives you the opportunity to be curious. And what's great about having guests is they can complement your expertise. So for example, as somebody who has a podcast about podcasting, anyone in the online business space complements what I do really well. They want to know about marketing, social media, trademarks is a huge question. And I don't need to pretend to be a trademark lawyer. Instead, I go out and I find somebody who fits the bill and I bring them into my podcast. And now I'm associated with expertise. So I think a big part of podcasting that I love is the opportunity to learn from really smart people. And you'll find that the more you podcast, you will actually become more of an expert about your topic, because you'll be doing the research, you'll be increasing the size of your network by bringing more experts into your circle in a really great, exciting way. So don't be afraid to not know the answers. And in fact, as a host, it's better to not have the answers and to let your guests showcase their skills.
Great point. I love, I was saying to you earlier, I feel like you're my people. I love finding your people, and just the way you think, the way you work, the way you behave. This is allowing us to just get this tribe of experts around us, and it's okay. You know, I know a little bit about some stuff. I'm not going to claim that space. You tell me what to do. Yeah, I love that, and that's great. It also brings me to the next question: how to kind of stand out. So when you're kind of the same question. So if you're coming off like a pro, what's some ways maybe we can get more practical or tactical that you can stand out in such a crowded marketplace? You said more people are online. I've addressed the fact that there's more content than ever. What are some of your tips there and expertise?
This is a huge topic among my own podcaster community. And there's something that I teach, I call it the winning podcast formula. And basically it invites you to say, not just what's the topic of your podcast. That's where people stop. They say, oh, I have a podcast about pop culture, health and fitness, parenting, marketing. That's what most people answer when I say, what's your podcast about? But instead, there are really two more key pieces that'll help you differentiate yourself from the market. So the first one is, who is your podcast for? If you have a health and wellness podcast and it's for teenagers compared to single parents, compared to baby boomers, those are such different audiences. And the content that you share is going to be so different. And as experts, this isn't going to be news to you. You know that your audience is not everyone. But a lot of podcasts historically have tried to be for everyone. So that's the piece a lot of people miss. And then the third one is the benefit. People are tuning into your podcast because there's something in it for them. It could be entertainment. It could be to feel like they're not alone. It could be to learn new skills. At the end, there is a benefit for the listener. And if you can put those three pieces together, this is a podcast about a topic for someone to help them blank. That's the winning podcast formula, and that's how you can stand out. And the last part I'll add to this is that I find that you can choose a niche in one of two directions when it comes to podcasts, but you do have to choose. You can't be the everything podcast for everyone, because then it's the nobody podcast for no one. So what I mean by this is you can say, okay, I'm going to be all things for, let's say, single parents. Because then if a single parent sees themselves in that clearly defined audience, then they're still going to tune in, even if you want to talk about lifestyle and parenting and healthcare and work, because it suits one person. Now, on the other hand, maybe you're the paleo podcast for anyone, because that's such a niche expertise that it's okay if your audience is a little bit broader. So I would always advise new podcasters to make sure that something about your podcast is niche, it's specific, because that's how you'll get fans. That's how people will hit play on your podcast, because they'll see themselves in your show.
That's right. Yeah. And even I would venture so far. I mean, even this is a tricky one. So entrepreneurs, I always go to this one because it's such a broad category. And I think it was a live or some post I did a few weeks back. It's like the podcast for entrepreneurs. Now we've all heard the ones that are on, on fire, and they're large enough that maybe they can get away with it, or they got in the game early enough. But really, entrepreneur, that's one example to me that always brings back that I'm just digging for that expertise. Like, what kind of entrepreneur? Like, what revenue are we talking? Am I a mom? Am I a man? Am I a person out of school? Like, I'm just trying to niche down for people on what that means. That's one example. Would you say?
Is just, in some ways, it's a job description, but it's not a human being.
Yeah.
So it's just one facet. Certainly, it's more specific than saying anyone, but I like that you're challenging people to go even a level deeper. And something I noticed you mentioned, I just want to touch on, is that what podcasters were doing a decade ago worked for them at the time. And obviously, they're successful now because they've built on years of doing what they've done. But strategies that worked for podcasts in 2010 don't work in 2020 anymore. It's a very different world. We just passed 1 million total podcasts in Apple Podcasts, and big players entering the arena like Spotify are really changing the game. So the podcasters who are going to be successful 3 years from now are the ones who are not acting like it's still 2010.
And you said people entering the game like Spotify?
So Spotify in the last year has really invested heavily in growing out the podcasts part of their app. Maybe listeners do or don't know this, but you can listen to podcasts on Spotify. And they've slowly made acquisitions of different products like Anchor, which is a free hosting platform. They've just brought on Joe Rogan in an extremely controversial deal where he's now exclusively going to be streamed on Spotify. And those are just two examples. But Spotify is putting a ton of investment into the podcast world, even going as far as testing video with podcasts. And it's pretty clear that they see this as a future for them. So if you don't adapt to suit what Spotify is doing, then you're probably going to get left behind.
Right. Yeah. Okay. Good to keep up on that, right? If this is the route you're going. We'll talk a bit about now let's see if I can get on the screen.
I don't want people to feel intimidated.
Just touch lightly, because I'm sure we could go
with Spotify. So I don't want people to feel like that's a barrier to entry. Like there's no approval based on worth or anything. Anybody can be in Spotify. So I just wanted to make that clear that that shouldn't hold people back.
Perfect. But it's good to know the platforms to be up on, right?
Exactly.
Really quick, and I know we could probably do a whole podcast just on this, would be the marketing versus revenue question. So basically, I love that you brought that up. You're like, look, am I doing this for marketing? Am I doing this for sales? I mean, to me, it's obvious. That's two very completely different approaches. So go ahead as to when you're launching strong, what are the main questions you need to be asking to make that choice, and how different are those two things?
For this group of experts, I have to imagine that all of you, maybe whether you have your own business or you have like authority in your space, your goals are all going to even be different from each other. But I feel pretty passionately about this topic, marketing versus revenue channel, because historically, when people ask the question, how much money are you making as a podcaster? What they really mean is, how much money are you getting from sponsorship or from Patreon donations? How much money are you earning because somebody is somehow paying for your actual podcast content? But on the other hand, your podcast can be a megaphone for the bigger picture. If you're a business owner, a consultant, a coach, an Etsy shop owner, if you have anything that's yours, because think about not just a podcast, instead you're just showcasing your expertise. You're mentioning that people could get a clarity call with you. You're mentioning that you have something else that they can purchase. And then your podcast starts to be just you building a relationship. It becomes a marketing channel. And in time, people will grow to trust you and they'll want to work with you. And your revenue will grow because of the podcast, but not because people are paying for podcast content. And that's a really important distinction. And I would say early on as a podcaster, I wouldn't worry about sponsorship, because a lot of sponsors are going to want 5,000 downloads per episode before they blink at you. And it's probably not going to be worth your time necessarily upfront unless you know you're coming into it with a starting audience. Maybe that applies to some of you. If you have an audience on another platform, then maybe sponsorship does make sense. But there are so many other things you can do even from day one. You can promote your own services. You can promote an affiliate product or course that you really believe in. As an example, in one of my podcasts called Booksmart, we talk about reading nonfiction books, and we are a partner for Audible. We didn't have to have a huge audience. We just had to apply and get approved. And so we have ads for Audible, and we earn, just a small amount of income, but it also kind of just reaffirms positioning yourself as being aligned with products that make you look like an expert. So there are a lot of things you can do, just sponsorship. And that's what I want to help open people's eyes to. And I wouldn't even worry about it on day one. If it stresses you out, just build great content, build an audience that knows, likes, and trusts you. And then eventually it'll be a natural fit that they'll want to work with you.
It's kind of like, well, any other marketing channel. You have the dive in, pay all in approach, or the organic approach, which is all building great content and great relationships.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that if someone was to sit down with you,
no one will want to work with you. Like if you only see your podcast as a means of getting sponsors and a means of getting people to listen, you'll never grow, because one of the biggest ways that podcasts still continue to increase their audience size is by referral. It's your listener telling a new listener to tune in. And so above all else, especially as a new podcaster, I would just focus really on the content, and then trust that as things start to pick up, then you will have opportunities to help it, drive towards revenue.
Right. Yeah. And no one would expect you to get out of the gates and just, even if you have all the right tech and all the, everything lined up. I mean, some things just take time, but like anything, if you are going to use it as a platform for your specific brand of expertise, you'll be able to devote the time that's needed to get it there over time. But again, spreading it out over 6 places, it's going to take a lot longer. That was a great little segment. Now, and I know there is ways. I'm also trying to get the links for. I'm going to be sharing with you Melissa's a couple of links she has. offered. So one of them is a free podcast checklist. It's kind of when you're going into this thing. I know a lot of you were a podcast checklist, everything to consider, I believe, right, Melissa, before launching.
Yeah, exactly.
And
because
then something
it's a brand new world. You've never thought about this before. So it's just kind of helping walk you through, like, what are the phases I actually need to take to go from having an idea to being in Apple and Spotify. So just a little checklist, high level, to get you guys started.
Awesome. So last couple questions. Top rookie mistake. What are amateurs doing? What do they miss?
Oh, there's so many things. I think I'm going to just stick with 2. So if I were to tell you one thing to spend money on for your podcast, it would be on the microphone. It doesn't have to be $500 microphone, but spending the money on an $80 to $120 microphone will immediately make you sound more professional and more legit. Because if you sound like you're calling in from your car and you're going through a bridge, nobody's going to believe that you're an expert, no matter how good your content is. And although, yes, it's true that good content usurps technology and can make up for a lot of things, the value of that microphone will pay off. So definitely invest in a microphone. And the other big mistake I see a lot of podcasters making is about search intent. So a lot of new podcasters maybe don't have a marketing background. And the good news about marketing is that it can be taught. But when you imagine putting your podcast out there, people have to find you somehow. And the way that they do that is through search engines, not just Google's, but Apple or Spotify, whatever app they're using to listen. So there's 2 specific examples I can give. One is, let's say you're interviewing guests and you think to yourself, oh, I should make the title of my episode the guest's name. Well, people probably aren't searching for the guest's name unless they're a really big name. So instead, put in some action words. Talk about their job, talk about something that you think people are actually searching for, like transitioning to a career in code or becoming a business coach. Imagine what people are actually typing into Apple Podcasts and make sure that the keywords you want to show up for are reflected in your podcast description, your episode titles, absolutely everywhere. Keywords are everything. So for me, I always have variations like podcaster or podcasting. So just take a step back, imagine what they're searching for, and then make sure you incorporate keywords.
Yes, and I go down and there's great podcast lists, but it's like a chat with Adriana Smith, a chat with
you've never heard of.
Don't know her. Yeah, like I'm sure she's amazing, but like I have to click another link to read the description, and I'm in a hyper informational job, but I just scan it, give it keywords, right?
Exactly. You have to tell people why they should care. Like you have to give them that reason. Don't bury the lead. Tell people exactly what they're going to get out of each episode. And I would say, like, stray away from being cutesy. Certainly the title, the name of your podcast, you could have something I call a treasure map name, where you kind of give a hint to what it's about without giving it all away. The title, I think you can be creative. But in terms of the episode descriptions and the episode titles, I would try to be really straightforward, because you're trying to hook someone's attention and get them to click.
Yes. And thank you for saying that. So many things you said is just so nice to have someone else expertise as an expert right in that niche, just make it make sense for that specific topic. So thank you. Mm-hmm. Amazing suggestions. Thank you so much, Melissa. Melissa has a course. I'm actually going to read it off your email because it was done so well. So I have a couple free links that I'm going to be putting in the comments. One is the toolkit, which is best microphones, speakers, if you want the tech side of things. The other thing is the free podcast checklist, probably something you could download first where you want to go through it. I've put Melissa's her Instagram account, Twitter, it's all Wit and Wired. And she has a deal on a course right now, I should mention, because she's been so amazing being on our live today, that it's called the Booked Out Podcast. And it's an active promotion, so it's all about prospecting, pitching, booking, and interviewing guests. So that's when you're like ready to go, and it's really a serious thing you're committed to. This is amazing. And today you'll save 20% on that program. Did I miss anything, Melissa? What else would you like to say?
Well, we'll say 40%, which I'm sure nobody will be upset about. So it's only $49. It's meant to be the key elements, and it's something that you could consume the content within a week and already have your next 5 to 10 guests booked by the end of next week. I'm big on action versus just having you watch a whole bunch of long videos. So it's a ton of exact templates you can borrow and just, it's very action oriented. Now, the other thing to bring up is if you're thinking about launching your own podcast and you're thinking, oh, booked out podcast, that sounds great, but what about everything else? Then I am also running a corresponding promotion for my flagship program called 5-Star Podcast Launch, which will take you from having an idea to being in Apple and Spotify within 2 months.
Okay.
And when you join this week, you'll get the Booked Out Podcast program for free. So we can throw a coupon code in the chat, but the code to get that course is Booked Out Launch. And you can just go to my website, wittenwire.com, and you'll be able to redeem that this week. It's only running through May 31st. So if you're catching this a little bit later, you may have missed it, but you can check it out. Oh, look at you. You're so fast on the uptake. The code is on the screen.
I'm getting good. I'm getting good on the screen. I'm so excited.
Those tech troubles we had before, we got nothing on you now.
Yeah, nothing. I'm like a few in here.
Yeah.
Handling like a champ. No, you've been amazing. That's great. Thank you so much for jumping on. I know you've had a couple other things this week, and we are going to keep connecting and chatting because there's lots more I'm sure we could connect on. So thanks for being in the group. Thanks for offering this. And yeah, I really hope you guys go and check out what she has to offer. Your questions, obviously you'll catch us on a replay. And yeah, and I mean, good, we hit our time mark too. So I hope you all have a great day. Melissa, thank you for joining us. And I hope to catch you all back. Yeah, you're welcome. Hope to catch you all back here real soon. Have a great day, everybody. See ya.